Well, welcome everyone. Pleasure to be with you all in this wonderful cyber world where there is an adjustable sized auditorium for the crowd, and that's really very, very fun. Any of you who have done in-person events where the room gets overly filled, you just kind of sunk. But with this, we're in great shape for being able to accommodate the room. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to mute the audience. So I'm going to get moving with the presentation. And the name of this presentation is With Freedom Comes Accountability, which I consider to be a crucial key to high productivity, high happiness workplaces, communities, and nations. A little bit of luck. There we go. So the word accountability activates a lot of negative thoughts and feelings in many people, and really for very good reasons. Some people are what I call accountability allergic because they had a history of being manipulated, shamed, or punished by what I call accountability abusers, people who have hijacked accountability to exert toxic power and control. And some are accountability avoidant because they view accountability as a burden or even as something that deprives us of freedom. Well, you know, one of the famous lines from the Spider-Man comics and movies is a line from Spider-Man's grandmother. She said, with great power comes great responsibility. So I'm paraphrasing that for this presentation. And that is to say, with great power comes great accountability. So in this presentation, I'm going to be reframing accountability as a valuable mechanism for self-development, team collaboration, and making integrity profitable. A little bit about my background. In tongue-in-cheek way, I characterize myself as a recovering psychologist and a professional troublemaker. But what's true in my career is that I've lived my career at the intersection of the two areas that my doctorate is in. I have a PhD in clinical and organizational development psychology. And my focus has always been interdisciplinary. And as a result of that, among the 12 awards I've received over the course of my career, I've received awards in the areas of business and governance well-being, in societal well-being areas, and in personal well-being areas. And so you're going to see some overlap in those multidisciplinary areas in this presentation. I've worn multiple hats in the business realm. I have multiple roles out in the business world. Radio TV Interview Report named me America's Integrity Expert. I've been featured in Forbes 18 times and Inc. and other sources as well. And among the 24 books that I've had a part in, 4 of those are on the screen. So I bring a varied background to this topic, and what we're going to be covering in this presentation is the hijacking of human potential, integrated accountability procedures, and how accountability and culture connect. We're going to start with culture, which in a business setting, I define culture as an organization's way of thinking, behaving, and working. And in society, it's really the same thing. Society's culture is a collectively agreed upon, more or less, set of norms around thinking, behaving, and working. And sometimes those norms are problematic and sometimes they're helpful. In the business setting, culture controls reputation. And what I often ask my business clients to tell me about is the ways in which their business embodies brand integrity and the ways in which their business commits brand slaughter. Brand slaughter is a term that I have taken to using because of a book by the title Brand Slaughter by a friend and colleague of mine, David Corbin. Bottom line is that culture controls profits, even though oftentimes culture is the last thing that companies will look at in terms of profits. But, you know, one of the immortals in the area of business development, Peter Drucker, said it really perfectly. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture trumps products, services, and strategy, really. And the more engaged, productive, and collaborative a company culture is, the more the company's value skyrockets, and the less likely it is that personnel will be released when a company is acquired during a merger and acquisition phase in a company's development. With that as kind of a framing, this presentation is going to introduce you to some key practical procedures for building core competencies in high performance cultures and that create high performance cultures. And my belief is that these competencies are more important than ever in today's chronic upheavals and with the workplace being all over the place, not only in the office anymore. And I just was checking the audience before I continued. So good. Let me keep going here. Many businesses believe that building a high performance culture requires integrity, engagement, collaboration, accountability, and loyalty. And in fact, when I give keynotes or presentations and I ask the audience who believes in integrity, who believes in accountability, who believes in collaboration, everyone raises their hands. But the problem is that those ideas fall in a category that I call true but not useful, unless those ideas are backed by skills development and consistent implementation of those skills. So the problem is that these values remain little more than good intentions until they're translated into effective skills and consistently used procedures. So a key problem inside of that, why isn't accountability used effectively as a growth tool rather than a punishment and coercion tool, relates to some key hijackings that in my experience, have occurred in society in general and in too many businesses. And that's the hijacking of accountability, impact literacy, problem solving, and human potential. And I'm going to unpack those now, especially impact literacy, which might not be immediately obvious in terms of what I mean. First, the hijacking of accountability. I mentioned this before. Accountability too often in businesses is misused as a coercion or punishment tool, which of course destroys goodwill. And the hijacking of impact literacy, what impact literacy is where my good intentions and my actions and words are matched rather than mismatched. So oftentimes what we have is a kind of impact illiteracy in certain businesses where people talk about good intentions, and oftentimes they really in their hearts have good intentions. But when it comes to the impact of the disconnect between their intentions and their follow through, there are a lot of excuses made for broken agreements, which of course, when that happens, that breeds resentment and distrust in a culture. And when resentment and distrust grows, collaboration and engagement and productivity and consequently profits suffer. And so does loyalty. The hijacking of problem solving. This is where we so often in businesses see problem solving deteriorating into gripe sessions, or conflicts deteriorating into attack, blame, and war, or in an effort to sidestep or avoid attack, blame, and war, issues get sidestepped. And again, all of these things decrease in engagement and collaboration. And of course, we see the hijacking of problem solving on a societal level right now with the massively high levels of societal divisiveness and political polarization, which are far greater than I've ever seen in the course of my 66 years on this planet. And then there's the hijacking of human potential, which has to do with an aspect of accountability that is related to the healthy way to do performance reviews. And human potential gets hijacked when performance reviews are done purely for the purpose of raises, promotions, or firing. Because if that's really the only function of performance reviews, that's really unfortunate, because that misuse of or limited use of performance reviews only ends up amplifying manipulation and destroying loyalty. So a big part of the solution to all of these hijackings is, from my experience in working with businesses and with other organizations, a clear understanding of what authentic accountability is and the procedures that bring authentic accountability to life. So what is accountability or authentic accountability? The way that I define it in one long sentence that I'll unpack is taking responsibility for the impacts, choices I make about how I spend my life energy have on those to whom I've made commitments. So unpacking that. What authentic accountability is self-responsibility. It's impact intelligence. It's taking responsibility for the fact that choices I make about how I spend my life energy, what impacts those choices have on anyone to whom I've made a commitment. So what I mean about how I spend my life energy is that all of us who are of goodwill, who are well-intended human beings, unless we're conflict phobic, when we say in the enthusiasm of a moment, yes, I'll do such and such, and we make a commitment. In the moment of that commitment, if we're being authentic, we really mean it. And then life happens. And sometimes life happens in a way where we're able to effectively follow through on those commitments. And sometimes life happens in ways where we discover after making a commitment that we have to reallocate portions of our life energy, things that we commit to spending time and life energy on. And so what's so common in society today is that if I make a commitment to you and then even something legitimate arises, let's go with that. I make a commitment to you and something legitimate arises that interferes with my following through with or implementing that commitment in the time frame that I've committed to. What the societal dysfunction, the dysfunctional societal expectation is if I can give you a convincing reason why I broke my agreement with you, then you should let me off the hook in terms of my impacts. And what that leads to, of course, is people lying, where they've broken an agreement and they'll make up a story about why they broke the agreement that compelling enough so that if we're all following the dysfunctional societal rules, then you will let me off the hook. There won't be any negative impact. We'll pretend that my broken agreement had no impact on you. And that's a massive problem and a very common problem in society today and in far too many businesses around accountability ignorance. If we are good friends and we're physically horsing around and I accidentally step on your foot with 20 pounds of pressure, your foot is going to register the exact same amount of pain as it would register if I stepped on your foot on purpose with 20 pounds of pressure. So impact is impact is impact. And the problem with the misuses of accountability is when an agreement is broken, then punishment and shaming happens rather than it being turned into teachable moments. So I'm going to be getting into the teachability aspects of accountability in a little while. But that's my definition of authentic accountability in one single sentence: taking responsibility for the impacts that the choices I make about how I spend my life energy have on those to whom I've made commitments. So authentic accountability is a crucial personnel engagement and company culture development mechanism. And I just switched my screen around for a moment just to see all of you in the audience again. Now I'm going to continue. Authentic accountability is critical training in what you now understand me to mean by impact literacy, problem solving, and human potential. And the problem is most people, especially people of goodwill, people who are well-intended, haven't received this kind of training in their families, in our education system, or in previous companies. So when they come to us in a company, when they come to work for us, we've selected them hopefully for the right reasons, for the right other reasons. It's a mistake to assume that our new employees necessarily have effective training in their prior lives, in their prior work history and education history and personal history in impact literacy, problem solving, and human potential. And because of that, as business owners really can go in one of two directions. They can either piss and moan about the fact that people don't know how to be accountable and responsible, or they can build the training of those missing skills in well-intended people into the company culture. So over the decades, in the part of my career that's about organizational development, because my doctorate's in both clinical psychology and organizational development psychology, I have seen that there appear to be 4 integrated collaborative procedures that are easy to learn and potent to use in creating a culture of authentic accountability. And I'm going to quickly go through what those are, and then I'm going to go into the ingredients in each of these procedures. So in an overview, the first procedure is what I call accountability capable commitments, a procedure that replaces relying on good intentions. Commitment isn't a commitment until and unless it is accountability capable. Again, I'm going to unpack the details of that in a couple of minutes. But just moving forward first with the overview. Second procedure is a best practices upgrades procedure for ongoingly elevating how things are done that replaces unproductive gripe sessions. And again, I'll go into those details in a couple of moments too. Third integrated accountability procedure is a breakdown repair procedure for turning collaboration or agreement breakdowns into growth experiences that enhance results instead of destroying engagement and collaboration. And, I'm going to wait to do a breakdown repair story until a little bit later. And the fourth is procedure for integrated accountability is a performance review procedure that is used regularly to review how individuals and teams are doing with completing commitments, implementing best practices upgrades, and implementing the results of breakdown repairs so that these enhance impact literacy, collaboration, and human potential. Now, because those 4 accountability procedures are what I have come to see is the backbone of high personnel engagement, effective working relationships, healthy culture creation, and elevating human potential, I'm going to go through these 4 core integrated accountability skills one at a time. So now we're going to go into the details of these 4 integrated step-by-step procedures. First of all, accountability capable commitments. First of the 4 procedures. This is the replacement to good intentions. You know, if we let's use an example just from personal life. If a family sits down together and has a meeting about what who's going to do what chores, and if I'm in that family and I say, I'll take out the garbage, a lot of people will just simply move forward and say, okay, David's going to take care of the garbage. That is not an accountability capable commitment. It's a good intention. It's not an accountability capable commitment until I have said, for example, I will empty all of the waste baskets in the house other than the waste baskets in people's individual bedrooms every Tuesday no later than 10 p.m. And I will then bring the garbage and recycling cans down to the curb for by 10 p.m. every Tuesday night for Wednesday morning recycling and garbage pickup. That is an accountability capable commitment. And I'm assuming that the difference between I'll take out the garbage and those specifics is quite clear. So what an accountability capable commitment has is two dimensions. One is the commitment itself. The other is what I call MIDS, which is an abbreviation for mutually interdependent deliverables. I'll get into that in a moment. The commitment is observables, behaviors, things that a fly on the wall would see or not see. The attributes of those behaviors, the specifications, the quality levels, and the time frame. So in the example I just used, the observables are I'm emptying all of the garbage cans, garbage cans in the house, pails in the house, other than in people's personal spaces, and I am doing that no later than 10 p.m. on Tuesday night, so we have a time frame. And the specifications of all of that are that I am going to complete my task when I have also then taken the garbage cans outside the house or the condo out to the curb by 10 p.m. on Tuesday night. So that's the commitment. The mutually interdependent deliverables, MIDS, has to do with this. I see this all the time. I'm the gratefully recovering son of an attorney, and my dad was an extremely ethical attorney, and so I have a very positive personal experience with the cream of the crop kinds of attorneys. I've run across some nasty attorneys and some incompetent attorneys, but I have a positive attitude with attorneys. And when I'm working with attorneys in business, what I see is that they put in their engagement agreements and the contracts that they build for businesses, all of the things that legally need to be included, but they don't usually teach their business owners and the C-suite how to craft engagement agreements that include mutually interdependent deliverables. So here's what I mean. If you're going to build a website, you need a website built for your business. And you go talk to some web designers and you find one that you really feel good about. You like their portfolio and there's good chemistry and all of that. And they give you an engagement agreement. And the engagement agreement only includes all of the things they will provide to you. If that's all it includes, run, Toto, run. Because they are going to need certain things from you in order for them to do their magic. For example, if one of the things they're building for you is an about page, they're going to need your bio. They're not going to be writing it for you. They don't know enough to know how to write a bio. They're going to need your press photograph. They're going to need these things. You haven't provided them with the assets they need to build a given page on the website they're committing to build for you, then there are going to be problems, because if you don't get those things to them, they're not going to be able to follow through in building the website. That's what I mean by mutually interdependent deliverables. So there's sequencing. that we're going to get a project done in a specific order. Tasks are going to be done in some optimized sequence. And we're going to all be clear on what the impacts are when we're doing those handoffs in a good way, and what the impacts are when there's a breakdown in that. We're going to have, instead of time frames, we're going to have what I call mid frames. Again, mutually interdependent deliverables. A mid frame is where, instead of my saying to you, if I'm the website designer, and I don't do that in my career, although I have built my own websites, but I don't do that professionally. So this is purely hypothetical. If I'm your website designer and I say to you, I'll have the website done in a month, it means nothing. That's an arbitrary time frame. If I say to you, I will have first draft of each page on your website to you within 72 hours of you providing me with the assets I need in order to build that page, then we have mid frames. In other words, I'm telling you how long it's going to take me to do my part. And I can make a commitment about that, but I can't make a commitment about the time frame, because I can only follow through in my time frame after I have the things from you that I need in order to build that page. So mid frames and milestones as well, where we get to see that the project is developing in stages, if you will, and what those stages are, because those are usually tied to payments. And midstream updates agreement. This is really crucial because life happens. And so the midstream updates agreement is that the moment that any of us find the time frame that we had committed to doing our part in something is not realistic, something else comes up, or there's a complication that we didn't know how to anticipate, or there's an additional resource that's needed in that we didn't anticipate as well in order to get something done, we provide each other with those updates immediately. We don't wait. And we do that so that we can relook at the agreement, the commitment, the time frames, the mid frames, all of those things in light of that new information. That's all of what accountability capable commitments require. Second integrated accountability skill is best practices upgrades. And this is an antidote to gripe sessions and endless rumination about how things are going in a business or in a nonprofit or in any organization. There are 3 steps to it, and the abbreviations are BWG, EBI, and BPC. Now, what those mean is BWG is bless what's good. Everyone takes a turn saying what's working well in order to bless that, and what is specified is why that's valuable. In other words, what the positive impacts are that come from what's working well, because that's part of the education that we need to provide our people in impact literacy, when they get to connect cause and effect. EBI is the antidote to gripe sessions. Instead of complaining about what's wrong, EBI stands for even better if. So we brainstorm about what could be even better than how things are. In other words, we're not complaining about how things are. We're looking at how can we make improvements. And again, with impact literacy training, we specify the result that those even better possibilities or brainstorms could result in, and why those results are valuable. And then BPC is we agree upon, out of all of those different even better ifs, we agree upon whatever set of best practices upgrades we're going to follow through on. So BPC stands for best practices commitments. And those best practices commitments are then noted for the purpose of performance evaluation. So the agreements, the accountability capable agreements in skill number 1, procedure number 1, those are noted for the performance evaluation. New upgraded best practices commitments, those are noted for the performance evaluation. Implementation breakdown procedure is accountability procedure number 3. And this is a procedure for turning breakdowns in collaboration or in following through on agreements into growth opportunities rather than resentment, conflict, and war. And there are 4 parts to it that I'll unpack in a moment: role, impact, repair, and new plan. But before I get to that, I want to go through what's at the top of above those 4 items. So there are 3 check boxes here in the top row: agreement, confusion, unanticipated circumstances, or broken agreement. So there is a need for repairing a breakdown in any of those 3 situations. We thought we had an agreement, but we actually were wrong. We were on different pages about what the agreement was. That's agreement confusion. Unanticipated circumstances is the life happens thing that I was talking about before. Broken agreements is where there's no agreement confusion. We're both on the same page about what my accountability capable commitment to you is, and I didn't follow through. So we identify what the source of the breakdown is, so we know how to focus our attention in our discussion. And then before we start the discussion, before we go through these 4 steps I'm about to review with you, we reaffirm first that we come to the discussion with a positive perspective about each other's intentions, that we are well-intended people, and there was simply what I call a loving mistake that occurred. What I mean by a loving mistake is a loving intention and a mistaken expression of that loving intention. And so we reaffirm positive perspective about each other's intentions. And here's why. If there's someone in a company who really is ill-intended, they need to be removed. They need to not continue to be in that company. So the people who remain are, by definition, people who have positive intention. So we reaffirm our commitment to staying connected with the fact that the other people involved in the situation have good intentions. There are just mistaken expressions of those intentions. And we have a perspective that I call a gift harvesting perspective. What I mean by gift harvesting is gathering precious value from unanticipated, undesired, and even unacceptable life experiences. So we are going to harvest gifts from what happened, no matter what it was that occurred. We're going to harvest gifts that elevate us as individuals, as a team, as a company, as an organization, as a society, whatever level we're working on. So that's all the setup for the procedure itself. The procedure itself has 4 steps to it. Every person takes a turn saying what their role was. That's step number 1, where they share what their unintended contributions to the breakdown were. Underline the word unintended, and underline as well, see the word my. I'm not telling you about your contributions to the breakdown. I'm telling you about my unintended contributions. You're going to tell me about yours. And when I'm done telling you about my unintended contributions to the breakdown, if I feel like I like it didn't stretch me too much to just be that transparent, where I'm still open to the possibility that I might have blind spots, then I might say, and if there's an unintended contribution, if there's an unintended role that I played in this breakdown that I'm not aware of, I'm open to hearing that. But each person gets to determine whether or not they are open to hearing that in that moment, because in reality, sometimes it's such a stretch for somebody to just simply say what they understand their unintended contributions to be, that's all they can bear in a given moment. And other feedback that they might be given will need to wait for another time. So that's step number 1 is my unintended role in the breakdown. Step number 2, we go around the circle and we each say the unintended negative impacts of my unintended contributions. So the unintended, again, unintended, because we're people of goodwill, negative impacts of my unintended role in the breakdown. And again, the option of asking if I've missed something if the person has enough room in them to be open to hearing that after they've been vulnerable and visible about what they know about their unintended negative impacts. Third step is repair. We go around the circle and each person says how they'll repair their unintended negative impacts in whatever ways and to whatever extent is possible. Now, in reality, sometimes water under the bridge is water under the bridge in that there can't be a repair. The damage is done, and there can be symbolic gestures that start to repair broken trust. But sometimes there's only a limited amount of repair that can be done. But when there is repair that can be done, each person says what that can be for them, what they can do. And then the most important part in this procedure is the fourth step, which is the new plan. And that is about how I am committing to handling future similar situations, a realistic next step better in the future than I knew how to do this past time around. And each person involved, each person that had a role and an impact, is going to be making a new upgraded best practices commitment. And so those are noted for performance evaluations as well, which leads to the fourth interconnected accountability ingredient. And that is about performance reviews. In fact, before I do performance reviews, I think I'm going to go back if I have the capability of doing that. I guess my buttons are not taking me backward. Well, I'll just stay on this slide and I'm going to tell you a quick story about step number 3, the the breakdown repair procedure. I had said earlier on I was going to save a story that there was a slide on earlier for later on. Well, the later is now. So there was a leader team of approximately, there was a leader team of 6 people that had deteriorated in their collaboration with each other, and they were at war with each other. And I was brought in to work with them around that. And I took them, first of all, I mapped out what I was going to do with them, and I got their agreement ahead of time that they were willing to participate in that 4-step procedure that I just went over with you on the previous slide. So I took them through those 4 rounds. Each person said what their unintended role was in the breakdown and collaboration among them. Each person, and with this group, fortunately, they were sophisticated enough so that at the end of each person's turn and each person's round, they did say, and if I missed something, I'd like to hear about it. That is unusual, but it did happen in this particular situation. So the first round, each person took a turn and said what their unintended role was in the breakdown. They then went around the circle again, and all 6 of them took their turn saying what the unintended negative impacts of that unintended role were. And then we went around the circle again, and each person said what they are committing to do to repair their unintended negative impacts to the extent that those are repairable. And then we did the 4th and final round, and each of those 6 people said what their new commitment was, their doable, realistic new commitment was to handling future similar conflicts or problems, a realistic step better than they knew how to do this past time around. By the end of that 4th round, this leader group of 6 was already back in collaboration with each other, and they were working collectively on deciding what they were going to do to repair their collective negative impact on the managers that were that reported to them. And what they chose to do, this was all organic. They came up with this plan. They decided they were going to do a fishbowl as a teaching mechanism. So they called a meeting of all of their managers. Not during this procedure. This was scheduled a couple of weeks after we did this procedure. They called a meeting of all of their managers, and they had all of their managers sit in an outer circle. And the 6 leaders sat in an inner circle in the middle of that outer circle, and they replicated this 4-step procedure. They fishbowled it. They had their people witness each of them saying what their respective unintended role was in the breakdown, what the impact was, what they're doing to repair the impact to the extent that it's repairable, and what their commitment for handling future similar situations a step better than last time around was. And by the end of that fishbowl, there were a whole bunch of people in the outer circle that were literally in tears because of the vulnerability, the realness, the authenticity, and the repair that was going on, because there had been massive damage, not only among that core leader team of 6, but that damage had rippled outward to the people that reported to them. 4-step procedure itself, not the fishbowl procedure that followed as part of this group of 6's repair procedure with their people, but the original 4-step procedure among just the 6 of them got completed in 2 hours and 40 minutes. So this doesn't have to be a big, long, drawn-out process in order to be effective at building collaboration and goodwill and restoring people into right relationship with themselves and each other. So this then leads to step 4, performance reviews procedure. Not step 4, but skills number 4 in these 4 interrelated accountability skills. The typical performance review is once a year. You sit down for the dreaded hatchet job, and again, as I said earlier, the conventional version of a performance review is really for the purpose of raises, promotions, and or firing, right? But that's not the kind of performance review that builds cultures. The kind of performance review that builds individual personnel engagement and collaboration among work teams is a 3-step process. First step is bless, the second step is upgrades, the third step is stretches. So what we're doing is we're reviewing the accountability capable agreements, the notes that were made about new commitments in best practices upgrades in the second procedure, and commitments around repair upgrades in the third procedure, and then stretches, and I'll get to stretches in a moment. But what we do is, first of all, we bless what's good, we bless what's working well in the person whose performance review it is, and we specify why that's valuable. This should look very similar to, and it is very similar to, the best practices upgrades procedure, just a more formalized version and a more comprehensive version of it. So again, we're more deeply embedding impact literacy, because in a culture that teaches, as our culture too often does, teaches something that in psychology we call learned helplessness, which is where people learn that the false lesson that they have less impact than they actually have. We need to reteach people about that. We need to help them overcome that learned helplessness propaganda training so that they can be highly engaged as individual personnel and highly collaborative in their teams. So we're always teaching elevated impact awareness. So when we're blessing what's good, we're also reviewing why that's valuable, what the positive impacts are that come from them doing the things that they're doing well. The second step is upgrades. We're brainstorming now in this step what could be even better than how this person is functioning now. And again, we're looking at identifying what those even better ifs could result in and why those results are valuable. And we're coming up with a new set of accountability capable commitments for between now and the next performance review, which, by the way, these kinds of performance reviews, before I get on to the final part of this, this performance reviews procedure, should be occurring every handful of months with highly self-motivated, self-governing, self-managing people. It could happen every 4 months or every 3 months with people who need initially a lot of hand-holding because they're still being onboarded or because they're underperforming. Though these kinds of performance reviews may have to happen once a month for a period of months before they can then start happening less frequently. They might even have to start happening once every week or two initially. Depends on the person. So step 3 in performance reviews procedure is stretches. And this is the agreement that the person who's being reviewed makes about their next personal business development growth edges. In other words, their growth edges, their personal growth edges in the business context, in the context of the organization, resources that they're going to use to move forward with those growth edges, the specifications and the time frame. In other words, even their stretches become accountability capable commitments, and all of those stretches are noted for the next performance evaluation so that part of that next performance evaluation includes the stretches. And so that's why you're seeing in the top of the right column, we're reviewing in these performance reviews accountability capable commitments, procedure number 1, best practices upgrades, procedure number 2, how they're doing with implementing those, and procedure number 3, how they're doing with implementing their commitment to handling future similar situations more effectively than the breakdown situation that had previously occurred. And then in the reviews procedure, we're also looking at the stretches, how they're doing with the stretches they've made between the last performance review and this one. When all of those 4 procedures are being used actively and consistently, culture skyrockets. The right people stay with the company, the wrong people leave. And with all of that, you now know more about the hijacking of human potential, integrated accountability procedures, and how accountability and culture connect than most leaders do. And my closing thoughts before I open up to any questions that there might be is that now is the time to end the hijacking of accountability, impact literacy, problem solving, and human potential in business, governance, and society. We can do it individually and collectively. And I just want to note for you that I have a booth in the expo hall, and it's booth C33. And I'm going to leave this slide up in case you want to be in touch with me and you can't make your way over to the exhibit hall, or even if you can. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch back around and see if I can see all of you. And I can. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute all of you so that if you have any questions or comments, you can go ahead and speak up. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts about what you've heard?
I like the way that you use the positive use when, especially at the end with the evaluations.
Yes. And what is it about that positive orientation that you like?
I like that it lifts the person up rather than pushing them down and making them feel bad or like they made a mistake.
Right. It's perfect. And again, the reason I asked that is because of the impact. What impact does this have? You're quite right. And in healthy cultures, whether we're talking about a family culture, a business culture, a volunteer nonprofit culture, a societal culture, when mistakes are misused, abused as opportunities to shame and punish, learning grinds to a halt. When mistakes are welcomed, and they're certainly not welcomed as in the sense of, oh boy, let's go out and make more mistakes, unless we're in research and development, in which case we need to be willing to make lots and lots of mistakes. But when they're welcomed in the spirit of learning, then people become less and less reluctant to speak up about their impacts, their unintended impacts, so growth can occur. Michelle, you just stood up, so did you want to say something, or were you getting ready to leave?
No, I was trying to look at the screens because I came in a little bit late, so I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to.
Oh, no, sorry at all. Get up and walk around to see the screen better if you want. That's fine.
Sorry.
No, sorry. No, sorry. There was no mistake made. It's just that we're in a virtual environment, and I wouldn't have had any way of being able to accurately interpret why you stood up.
I stood up, right?
What other comments or questions do you have, any of you, about what I've presented? Well, maybe some of you aren't even fully here. So I think with that, since I'm not hearing from any of you and I'm not seeing anything in the chat box, I think what I will do is I'll bring this presentation to a close. If you have individual questions you want to ask, I think what I'll do is I'll ask Tony to stop the recording, and I'll come off of the stage down to you all if you want to have a post-presentation discussion before you go off to your next activities. So Tony, I'll leave it to you to go ahead and stop the recording.